Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this event. Ken Kunken is truly one of the icons of the Nassau County DA's office. As I said, I joined the office in 1987, and it's just so great to be here tonight, to be joined by so many of Ken's relatives and friends and co-workers and former co-workers. As Ken often pointed out, he said he couldn't have accomplished what he accomplished without, number one, the love and commitment of his family members, and so many of you here tonight, and of his friends and of his co-workers and people at the Nassau DA's office, from the process servers, secretaries, paralegals, ADAs, investigators. All have been so helpful to him over the years, and he always expressed his appreciation for that. But we're here tonight to honor a truly remarkable man. Before we begin, though, I'd like to introduce some of the guests that are here. At table number one with Ken and please hold your applause to the end, we have Ken Kunken, Anna Kunken, the boys, as they're coming on, Timothy, James, Joseph. Unfortunately, Aunt Betty Reba could not make it tonight, but Uncle Jay Reba is here. Steve Eric and Joanne Eric, who are, Steve is the publisher of Ken's book, and Dr. Robert Linden, who you'll see later in the presentation, was one of Ken's Sigma Nu fraternity brothers. And he was fortunately able to join us tonight. At table number two, we have Ken's brother and best friend, Steve Kunken, Nikki Pock, Steve's wife, who is a retired Suffolk County family court judge. Steve, I should point out, is also a very accomplished attorney, having started his career as a Nassau County legal aid lawyer before ultimately opening up a private practice and having recently retired. We're also fortunate to have, in addition to Steve and Nikki, Meryl Lashansky and Jeff Lashansky. Meryl is Ken's sister. Jeannie Danis, Jill Danis, Frank Tausches, his wife Lorraine Tausches, Jeff Haas, and his wife Mary Ann Haas. At table number three, we're very honored to have Dr. Christopher Rosa, who is President and CEO of the Viscardi Center, Frank Kraczynski, who's Director of the Suffolk County Office of People with Disabilities, his wife Maribel, the Honorable Robert Papilla, Nassau County District Court Judge, and Joni Matterish, who's President of the Suffolk County Rehabilitation Council. Table number four, we have the executives of the Nassau County DA's office. We have Monica Hickey Martin, who's the Chief Assistant, and our Executive Assistants, Kevin Higgins, Rick Whalen, along with Brian Lee, Lara Marchand, who's our Director of Training, and we're very honored to have my former co-worker at the Nassau DA's office, Ginny Clayton. And I'd also like to thank up front also the co-chairmen of this committee, Brian Lee, and my good friend and one of the last people from the Dennis Dillon era is Elise McCarthy. Now, I had the very challenging task. Ken wrote a book that's over 400 pages, and it was called upon me to reduce that life to a 10-minute slide presentation. So Ken, I can't do the justice that you did, and for anyone that wants to know the rest of the story, I suggest you buy his book. But Ken, it's a real Long Island story, because Ken was born and raised on Long Island. His parents, although not born and raised on Long Island, they have the classic great American, the greatest generation story. Like my own family, after the war, coming to Levittown, New York, and starting their life. But I thought to really appreciate Ken Kunken, you have to go back to the beginning, which is July 15th, 1950. Ken was born to Leonard Kunken and Judith Kunken. Give you a little background on Leonard Kunken. Leonard was born in the Bronx. Came out to Nassau County before World War II. He's a graduate of Lynbrook High School, and he's seen here with his sisters Lorraine on the left and Carol to the right. And Lorraine, Ken often mentioned, was such an instrumental part of Ken's life that she was really like a mother to him. And he always spoke so highly of Aunt Lorraine, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. Leonard went to the University of Vermont, which, Ken, I think it was your second choice, unfortunately. College, your first choice was Cornell, but Leonard attended the University of Vermont until he was called into service in the United States Army. And he had quite the experience. He had to leave the University of Vermont. He was part of the 3rd Army Division of the United States Army. He fought across Europe, all the way into Germany. He fought in many famous major battles, including the Battle of the Bulge. And his job, he was a machine gunner on the top of a half-track. After completing his years of service and defeating the Nazis, Ken's father came back to Long Island and then back to the University of Vermont, where he met a Judith Goldblatt. Judith Goldblatt, I believe, Leonard was in his final year, wanted to complete his career at the University of Vermont. So he came back to the University of Vermont and he needed a tutor in a particular subject. And his tutor was Judith Goldblatt. They fall in love, and they got married. And this is the wedding picture from Manhattan. They were married at the temple in Manhattan. We have Ken's mother, Judith. As I said, the former Judith Goldblatt, who was born in Brooklyn and graduated from Lawrence High School in the 5 Towns. You see her here from left to right, 7-year-old Helen, 8-year-old Betty, 17-year-old Ruth, 25-year-old Leonard, and 21-year-old Judith. Now here's the classic American story. Leonard Kunken fought throughout the battles throughout Europe, came back, found the woman of his dreams, got married, and like thousands of members of the greatest generation, made his way to Levittown, New York. And here we see he was in the flower section of Levittown, 58 Morning Glory Road. And shortly after arrival there in 1948 was the birth of the young man you see in this picture, Stephen Kunken. 2 years later was the birth of Ken Kunken, who you see here with Stephen sitting on the couch, Judith, and young Ken Kunken. Unfortunately, during this time in the United States, this was before vaccines, before 1955 with the polio vaccine. And polio was running rampant throughout the United States. The highest number of fatality rates from polio in the United States in the early 1950s. And unfortunately, Levittown was not immune from this. And on Morning Glory Road, 10 people were stricken with the disease. 2 of them, one being Steve Kunken, who had a mild case of polio, and also Ken's mother, Judith. And tragically, when Ken was only 27 days old, Judith succumbed to the disease of polio. And Ken's brother Steve had to undergo about 6+ months of rehabilitation. But fortunately, he recovered, and he's not only a great lawyer, but he's also a phenomenal athlete today. But the challenges that Leonard confronted was he found himself as a young man with a 27-year-old newborn, 2-year-old son that needed treatment. He had to move back to the family house in Lynbrook. And you see 8-year-old Ken Kunken here at the family house in Lynbrook. And this again, the DA mentioned the importance of family to Ken Kunken. I can't tell you the things, the wonderful things Ken has said about how wonderful his family is. It's kind of like, I think they feel like they're the Waltons of Nassau County. It's just a real, homey, all-American family. And but it was that family, that the grandparents in particular, but more particularly grandmother Goldblatt and grandmother Kunken, who raised Ken in those critical early years. And I actually see a little bit of the grandmothers in you, because part of my speech is one thing that's always amazed me about Ken. I've never heard him get excited. I've never heard him say a bad word about everyone. One of the key attributes is equanimity. And I've read his book, and I saw your grandmothers, Ken. And I see your grandmothers in you, because they have that same attitude and attributes of positiveness, of being a great person that comes from your grandparents. The other person who Ken developed a much closer relationship with, because he wasn't only his big brother, he's his best friend. He used to see young Steve Kunken with Ken Kunken in the Lindbergh house. They have a lifelong bond that they're still best friends to this day. Again, not only does his immediate family is very close to him, it's his dad and his cousins, he said, are as close to him as his own brothers and sisters. We have Ken over on the left. We have Steve at the top. Leonard remarried in the 1950s, and Ken had a new sister, which he said he absolutely adored. It was Merrill, who's seated on Grandma Kunken's lap. And we also have here the Danis family, and we're appreciate the fact that we have the Danis, Jeannie Danis and Jill Danis with us this evening. But Jeannie is not in the picture. Thank you. She was not born yet. Now, Ken ultimately moved with Leonard. Merrill was born in the 1960s, and they got a new house in Oceanside. This is their house in Oceanside. And it was there Ken developed his tremendous love of sports, as well as Steve. Ken played every sport. He was a quarterback at elementary school. He did basketball, baseball, football. And that continued right through to the Oceanside Sailors, where Ken was a tight end or defensive end. The Oceanside Sailors, he's number 23 in this team photo of his varsity year and senior year. After Ken graduated from Oceanside High School, he went to Cornell University to get his degree in engineering, industrial engineering. He liked school, but I think he liked Sigma Nu fraternity and fraternity activities maybe a little better. And this is a picture of his fraternity brothers, and we're very pleased to have with us one of his fraternity brothers with us tonight. And Ken is circled, as you can see here, Ken is circled in the center of the photograph. And additionally, a number of his, obviously had a very big fraternity group, but seated right next to him to the right is Dr. Robert Lindy, who's also present with us this evening. Now Ken, as I mentioned, he spent summers, he was a lifeguard at Nassau Beach. And he also, when he went to Cornell his sophomore year, he started playing football. He was in a division that was for, I believe it's 150 pounds and under. It's sprint football for lighter weight football players. And he played his sophomore and junior year. But tragically, on Halloween Day in 1970, his junior year, Ken sustained a traumatic spinal injury that resulted in Ken having to go for treatment, to hospitalization and rehabilitation for months afterwards. And it was a very, very, very challenging time, to say the least, for Ken and his family. But it was the combination of Ken's indomitable spirit and his loving family and friends who rallied in support of Ken, and he miraculously recovered well enough to return to Cornell in 10 months. It's unbelievable. While he was being treated at Rusk Institute, however, there was an editorial in Newsday about the Ken Kunken case. And there was a story in Newsday, again, it was an editorial pointing out the tremendous financial burdens to families when there's a catastrophic injury, and how something had to be done. And the person that took up the call to that was Senator Ted Kennedy. You see here Senator Kennedy with Senator Peter Dominic from Colorado. And Senator Kennedy asked Ken, and Ken's father, Leonard, who's also pictured here, so you have Senator Kennedy, Ken, and that's Ken after being treated for just 5 months. He's testifying at a hearing that was called at Hofstra University. There's Peter Dominic and Ken's father, Leonard. Ken testified at that hearing, and at the end of that hearing, he received a letter from Senator Ken Kennedy, which reads as follows: Dear Ken, I thought you might like to have the enclosed, a quotation that Senator Robert Kennedy loved and that symbolized his commitment to the belief that one man, underlined, can make a difference. And little did Senator Kennedy know how true that would be in the case of Ken Kunken. He signed it with "My best personal wishes, Senator Ted Kennedy," and he gave Ken the paperweight that you're seeing here that states RFK, "Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream of things that never were and say, why not?" 1968. And it's not a coincidence that that's the title of Ken's book, because he lived by that and we all saw that. Nothing was impossible for Ken. As I said, he recovered. In 10 months, he's back, only a year behind his class at Cornell University. He's back attending classes. You have him here at his IBM Selectric. And you gotta remember, when Ken went back to Cornell, this is pre-ADA. There were no ramps, there were no curb cuts, there were no laws or special accommodations for those who had disabilities. So he had to be carried up as many as 16 steps to get to class, with a number of other challenges, but he made all his classes. And as I said, miraculously, he graduated only a year behind, and here he is at graduation from Cornell University in 1973. And joining him are the grandparents Goldblatt, his Aunt Betty, and Ken. And here we have his graduation picture from Cornell. After this, Ken went on unbelievably. He wasn't done yet. He got a master's degree from Cornell University, a master's degree from Columbia. He got his job then at Abilities with the world-renowned advocate for the disabled, Henry Viscardi, who the Viscardi Center is named after now. And he worked at Abilities because Ken wanted to help you. It's one of the things Ken always pointed out to me. I said, "Ken, why was that your first job?" He said, "I wanted to help people. I knew what I went through. He went through." He said, "I think I have a lot to offer. It could help them. What should be done maybe better than happened to me." And he was a counselor, both for vocational and rehabilitation counselor, to many, many people at what was called Abilities at that time. The news media picked up on Ken's amazing recovery, his amazing accomplishments. Here we see Ken with both people that attended the Viscardi Center, Abilities, as well as staff. And here some of you who are old enough may remember Melba Tolliver on Channel 4 News interviewing him. But Ken, as this wasn't done yet, he wanted to be an advocate for the disabled, number one. He said, and so many times he told people he counseled, "I can't help because I'm not a lawyer." And he said it so many times, he said, "You know what? I could be a lawyer. I could help them. I could be their advocate." But something else also happened. We all know what a phenomenal attorney his brother Steve is. And Ken used to go out periodically, because Steve was trying many, many cases with the Nassau County Legal Aid Society, and he would watch Steve. And he said, "You know what? I want to do that too." And actually, at Steve's urging, after Ken applied and got into Hofstra University, Ken decided to become an intern in 1981 in the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. And this is his intern photograph from 1981 with Dennis Dillon. The people you may notice in here, unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight. It was Connie and Joe Gentile. Connie Gentile is standing just to the left of Mr. Dillon in this photograph. And then Ken, after experiencing that, he works for some very well-known people who would become very well-known in the legal community. People like Susan Katz Richmond. Sue Richmond was an ADA at that time. From there, she became a law secretary. I think it's a record, to 7 judges in Nassau County. She also was past president of the Nassau County Bar Association. And she's currently serving as an elected village justice. Also with another person that Ken served for, I believe, Ed McCarty, who was one of the premier lawyers in our major offense bureau at the time. Ed McCarty became a justice of the Supreme Court and went on to be Nassau County surrogate. And we also have another person who we're very pleased to join us tonight, another person that Ken interned with, Bob Nigro. We all know Bob Nigro. He's the administrator of the Nassau County Bar Association, assigned counsel defender plan, and Ken, as I said, was also his intern. Well, based on the experience with those stellar ADAs, the experience he had in the DA's office, in spite of all the challenges, he said, you know what, I want to be an ADA. And he applied to Mr. Dillon. This is a photo from his internship. Ken was the first person accepted in the class of 1982 upon his graduation from Hofstra University. Here he is with Steve and Leonard. And here is him starting his day, first day at the Nassau County DA's office with Dennis Dillon. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Robert Kennedy is looking over his shoulder. Ken embarked on a remarkable career. August 1982, he begins his work at the Nassau County DA's office, and it is truly a stellar career. I had not come out here at that time. I was a DA in the Bronx at that time, and had not come out to 1987. And already by the time I got here, Ken was a superstar. He started, as so many ADAs did, in Nassau County Traffic Court. He only was there 3 days, and he was immediately moved up to district court. In district court, it didn't take long before the supervisors in district court commented on the high quality of Ken Kunken's work and his exceptional intellect. And it wasn't long before Ken Kunken came to county court. There were news articles about him in Newsday. And we're very pleased that Ken's longtime office mates, and you know what annoys me about these two guys? They're here tonight. This picture, this picture could have been taken tonight because it's at the Nassau County Bar Association, and there's 3 people that annoy me. Greg Martello, Steve Lamaga, and Bob Heaton. Because all 3 of those guys look so much better, look phenomenal. They never, ever age. These were Ken's office mates for many, many years. Greg Martello and Steve Lamaga. And I conference cases with you guys many times, because when they were leaving, the very humble guys, they made a gigantic poster of themselves. And you know what? And you know what? Ken's going to make a presentation tonight, because every time I see Steve, he says, Dan, whatever happened with that man big poster? I said, I don't know. But Steve, I asked Anna, and the only person more organized than Ken is Anna. And we have a treat for you that Ken is, when you speak tonight, Ken is going to make a presentation to you and to Greg. But these were his good office mates. They were there from 89 to 92. I conference cases long after they left with Ken, Greg, and Steve, because every time you walk in, guys, I was looking at your picture. And he was just absolutely remarkable in the county court. His trial skill, his interpersonal skills. And what did they do to give Ken a break? Ken was assigned 2 of the most difficult parts in county court, which he handled with the trademark Kunken equanimity. Unbelievable, which I'm going to get to. He was well prepared, and unbelievably, he was always eager to try cases. In fact, I asked Elise, I said, Elise, what do you remember best about Ken Kunken? She said, he was always looking for a trial. He was hard worker, gave maximum effort. And I'll give you some statistics. From 85 to 1986, Ken doubled his trial output, but he wasn't done then. In 1987, Ken had one of the highest number of trials in the county court bureau. He was one of the most productive ADAs, and in spite of a crushing caseload, he was doing back-to-back trials on cases. By 1989, he was trying some of the most difficult cases, and he had carried a caseload of 75 cases. It's amazing. And amazingly, not a complaint, and he was always looking for more. It wasn't, I'm too busy, I can't do enough. Ken was always bringing on. And we did. They gave him more and more work, and Ken was phenomenal. Ken is noted by his supervisors willing to take any assignment, no matter how difficult. And one of his most challenging cases, which if you own a homeowner with a lawn, you'd appreciate it, Ken was assigned a case, we'll call it the Paracard case. And there was a disgruntled lawn care worker who wanted to get back at this lawn care company. So what does he do? Well, there's a tanker scheduled to deliver pesticide. So this worker says, I'm going to show my boss. He emptied the tank of pesticide and put paraquat. Paraquat is a defoliant that's probably 28 times stronger and more toxic than Roundup. It kills everything. So unfortunately, unbeknown to this driver, he gets in his truck, not thinking he has pesticide and he has defoliant, and goes throughout Nassau County spraying all these lawns. I can't tell you the number of angry homeowners as their lawns turned a crisp brown. Who was assigned that case? His main witness was a drug dealer. He had problematic lab evidence, multiple very angry complainants. It's a case for Ken Kunken. And I want to read through the comments of the supervisor who watched that trial and wrote a memo to Dennis Dillon saying she was so impressed. She said, without any notes and with no pause to recollect his thought, Ken gave one of the finest summations I have ever heard. Without ever repeating any point, he spoke for over 1 hour in perfectly organized fashion. During the hour, I was never bored, in spite of the fact there was nothing exciting about the evidence itself. The jurors were as mesmerized by ADA Ken Kunken as was I. It was only because of his superior summation that ADA Kunken had any chance at a conviction in this case. The office wasn't done with Ken Kunken. He's a trial lawyer, so it's going to get even more challenging. He's now giving 110%. In 1991, Dennis Dillon, in recognition of the great work that Ken has done, he was promoted to senior trial assistant. And to reward Ken as senior trial assistant, he was placed in 2 of the most challenging county court parts. He was referred by 92 as a mainstay of the county court trial bureau, and in 1995, he's trying all the most serious cases in county court. He was assigned an attempted murder case, which involved him having to bring a witness in from a foreign country. But he showed his total Kunken-focused and organized attention and consistently sound judgment. And it was his ability to manage that case, as well as his exemplary trial presentation, that were responsible for the conviction in this serious and a highly problematic attempted murder case. His maturity and ability continued to distinguish him as a leader in county court. His cross-examination was described as a pleasure to watch as he disassembled every defendant's testimony with simply his powerful intellect and reason. And it was by 1996, by virtue of Ken's maturity, his judgment, his trial skill, and acumen, he was designated as a senior trial advisor. Followed shortly up by deputy of the County Court Trial Bureau. And we have here Ken in his office, which Ken has been in for over 35 years. And I had the pleasure of giving a first-hand eyewitness to Ken Kunken from 1987 till today. And I served with Ken. I was a line ADA with Ken Kunken. I was a deputy bureau chief with Ken Kunken. And as I said, he is absolutely, Ken, and I think everyone agreed with me in this room, you are truly an icon and a standout among anyone who's ever been in our office, and we're all so very proud of you. So Ken, after being assigned as a deputy bureau chief, it doesn't get any easier, because now Ken's world was 28 ADAs in county court, supervising them, and now he's doing everything. He's doing trial presentations, trial preparations, plea approvals. Ken was and one thing I'll say, when I was working with Ken, Ken, I know there's a lot of new technology out there, but I will take you, and I don't care how good the technology gets, will always be better than ChatGPT. Because you could go into Ken Kunken on anything, and he would have the answer. Till this day, I still go to Ken, and any number of questions. He's a wealth of information. And he provided wise counsel to me when I was an ADA, deputy bureau chief, as we served in supervisory positions together. And again, he had a really challenging task, and we have a number of former ADAs, Ken, who work with you and worked under you, and I know they all have this highest regards from you in terms of your ethics, your personality, and just the wonderful person that you are. This is Ken with his vast, I think when he left, he had 160 binders of case law that we all relied on. And here is a photograph testament to the good work that Ken does. This is a typical conference with Ken. And again, you intern with famous people. This is you're interning, you're right now with 2 young ADAs in the County Court Trial Bureau, a number of young ADAs. We're pleased to have two of them with us tonight, and I'd like to make mention of the Honorable Melissa Lewis, who is City Court Judge, and she's standing with the file to the left, and to the right we have the Honorable Anna Aquaveda, who's a Suffolk County District Court Judge. And this is a typical session. The only difference is they make more ADAs in the office with Ken on his typical day of case conferencing. In terms of more stats, before he became a supervisor, very impressive trial statistics. Ken tried over 65 felony trials, conducted over 118 pretrial hearings, and did over 250 grand jury presentments. And each case well prepared, thorough, and extremely organized. ADA Donnelly, as I mentioned, was a roommate, office mate with Ken, rose up to county court, and then I know Ken appreciated the friendship with her. But Ken also mentioned, from the DA down, he loved everyone at the Nassau DA's office. And Ken and I agree, one of the great things about being in a DA's office, number 1, it's public service. Number 2, it's helping victims. And number 3, it's the people that you work with. Because you work with some of the finest people you could imagine. And here we have one of our key linchpins still in the Nassau County DA's office, Trina Nocerino, our paralegal. We have former linchpins in the office, Susan Ziegler, who I can't say enough good things about. She was our head secretary. And Mary Burke, who was our paralegal. So there's key roles in making all of us in county court a success. Ken was also, he went to every holiday party. Here we are with Carolyn Kelly, who was deputy chief at that time, was assisting with the entertainment with, at that time, Bureau Chief Mitch Benson and Melissa Lewis. Ken also got in the holiday spirit. He's seen here with Mitch Benson and Gloria Violandi, who was one of our secretaries in the Major Offense Bureau. And finally, we have District Attorney Ann Donnelly with Ali Ajamo, who's the current boss of the District Court. And in her wisdom, County Court. In her wisdom, the DA created an award for Ken Kunken. It's the Ken J. Kunken Award, which is presented to the outstanding district attorney in the Nassau County DA's office. And this was presented, she created this award in 2023. And it was given to the person that most exemplified all the traits that you heard tonight about Ken Kunken. The high ethical standard that he had, the tremendous performance. And it's probably the highest standard in the DA's office. It's basically like a prosecutor of the year, the top prosecutor, the one who epitomizes all the ideals represented by Ken Kunken. And we're so grateful for the DA creating that award. And most appropriate candidate was Ali Ajamo, who we all know really does epitomize all the great attributes exhibited by Ken Kunken. Here we have the executive staff: Mark Meany, D.A. Donnelly, Ali Ajamo, Kevin Higgins. We have Kevin Higgins, Chief Assistant Monica Hickey, Martin and Brian Lee. As was mentioned earlier, probably one of the most important, I'd say there's two most important events in Ken's life. Two of the most greatest things that ever happened is meeting Anna and the birth of his 3 sons. I can't say enough things about Anna. Anna, I've known you for 25 years. You've been there every day with Ken. I know you as a key part of our team. And I'm just going to take this time, Anna, if you please step up, because I'd like to make a presentation to you in particular. And I can't thank you enough for all the work that you've done. You've been such a key member of our office. You're, as Ken refers, as his angel from heaven. You're one of the 2 greatest things that ever happened, and on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is Ken's first dance with Anna. This is Ken's wedding photo. This is the next greatest thing, the birth of Ken's 3 sons. Which was the topic of Newsday, Daily News. And again, this may look familiar, Greg. Oh, actually, Steve LaMagna. Steve LaMagna was familiar to you? Steve LaMagna was good enough to give Ken needed 3 cribs. Steve was good enough to give 2 of the cribs used by his children. Kevin Higgins and Ginny, this is a shout out to you. You were good enough to give him your former swimming pool, which Anna used as a sandbox during the winter months. This is Ken cruising around the neighborhood, taking his boys for a walk. And the significance of this picture is Ken often said that Halloween was one of the saddest days of his life. And it wasn't until the boys began trick-or-treating. And from that point on, this is the happiest day. One of the happiest days of the year from that point forward. The other thing you love, when Ken comes home from work, this is what he typically would see, being greeted by his 3 boys. We also put the boys to work at the DA's office. They were our poster boys for Operation Safe Child. They walked in the Markham Challenge. And Ken also went with boys. We have here Dave Paldy and Francis Andy Pietra pumpkin picking with Ken and the kids and Anna. Now this is Bob Hayden. Now if you want to know what's going on here, he's trying to watch a Jet game while reading to the boys. And it's really, really tough. This is one of my favorite photos. It's a backstory. Nassau County Courthouse is the only courthouse in America that was also served as an Airbnb. In 2011, Ken was forced to evacuate his house. His relatives were also under threat because of Hurricane, I believe, Irene. All the hotels were booked. Shelters would not take anyone who was in a wheelchair other than a caregiver, so no children. So Ken resorted to coming back to, and I know a lot of people have feelings about the old county courthouse, but in a nuclear attack, or a tornado, or a hurricane, it is the safest place to be in Nassau. Ken came to Nassau County Courthouse. He stayed in his office with Anna, and we had an office across the way, and that was used as the boys' bedroom. And that's a picture of them settling down for the night in the Nassau County Courthouse. Ken has also been active at events we've had with Dr. Chris Rosa from Viscardi and the Alan Robert Padilla. This is when we celebrated the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is the panel. And this is the DA. This was an event sponsored by DA Donnelly in conjunction with the Viscardi Center. And here we have DA Donnelly, Dr. Chris Rosa, and the county executive. Here we have another icon from the Nassau County DA's office, is now Professor Fred Klein with Ken Kunken lecturing to a class. And now we have retired Ken Kunken, who's doing podcast interviews. We have him here with his publisher, Steve Eric.
Yes.
And of course, the boys who are now in college, they finished their first year of college. We have Joseph on the left, who is currently at Cornell, finished his freshman year. We have Jimmy, who's at State University of New York at Morrisville, behind Ken. And we have Timothy, who's now at the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. And I'd say we see here Ken with his favorite roles as father and husband. I'm now going to let you all eat, and we'll then continue with the program. Thank you very much.
No, it's like they happen every year, so we become numb to it. Just roll with it. The Halloween photo was like that.